Welcome to Inside ArtScroll, where the books that we read and the people that write them come to life. It's a true pleasure to welcome Rabbi Nachman Seltzer all the way from Ramat Beit Shemesh to Inside ArtScroll. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Seltzer.
Aleichem Shalom. Thank you for having me.
It's a schus, it's a merit. Rabbi Seltzer, we're here to discuss a book which I think is going to become probably your best-selling book ever. The book Miracles, Missiles, and Mesiras Nefesh. A deep dive into the world post-October 7th. And before we begin, I want to ask you a personal question. Rabbi Seltzer, you have written novels, fiction, biographies. 30, 40 books, I'm assuming maybe even more. More?
This book will be I think it's number 54.
Unbelievable. That's crazy. 3 times high. But I don't think that I ever knew Nachman Seltzer as a journalist. As an author, as a prolific author, as a fascinating author, I read this book and it was a masterpiece of journalism. Do you view the book as journalism or as telling the story? How did you approach it?
I don't know if you saw the cover yet, but the book is, in essence, it's a little bit of a collaboration because I spoke to Rabbi Yisrael Katzover, who's one of the oldest military journalists in Eretz Yisrael. He was already a military journalist from the time of Levi Eshkol. And anytime I need to get the background story of any interesting event, he's my go-to person. So it is a form of journalism. Combine that with incredible stories of Mesiras Nefesh, combine that with incredible stories of miracles, and you get Miracles, Missiles, and Mesiras Nefesh. So yes, there's definitely a big element where I wanted to go behind the scenes, and because I'll tell you what happened. To me, I'm like, the year was a very challenging year, and the beginning of the year, it just seemed like it's getting worse and worse. And then suddenly, in a 10-day period, before the 10-day period, suddenly things start happening, and Israel assassinates one guy, and then Israel assassinates another guy, right? And then they assassinate another guy, and I'm like, okay, these things are happening now. They're taking off the gloves. They're getting ready to fight back, and then we get to the 17th of September, I think it was the 17th and the 27th, where suddenly everything changed. It was v'nahapachu. It was when the beepers went off. That's the beginning of that's the first thing. All over all over Lebanon, Syria, Iran, pagers are exploding in an incredible pinpointed attack just on terrorists that was started years and years ago in a brilliant move, and it culminates with Nasrallah's death 10 days later. And I'm like, this is v'nahapachu. And that's the story. Originally, I wanted to call the book 10 Days, because I wanted to tell the story of the 10 days between the beepers, but I realized I couldn't just focus on 10 days. I had to tell the story of the year and show the progress, the trajectory of what happened, because it was like a buildup of incredible miracles. So while it was a very hard year and there was a lot of sadness and a lot of pain and a lot of challenges, at the same time, HaKadosh Baruch Hu showed us incredible miracles and more miracles, because we started off the year with what they call the ring of fire around Eretz Yisrael. Hezbollah with 250,000 missiles, Hamas with hundreds of thousands of missiles, Iran with countless missiles, Syria with countless missiles, and Baruch Hashem, at this point, that ring of fire is no longer what it was, even 4 months ago, and it's all miracles. So my goal with the book was to show everyone that look at the miracles that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did for Klal Yisrael. October 7th was really such a terrible thing, but that led to an outcome that changed the whole Middle East.
Fascinating. When I read through the book, I felt like I was on an emotional journey. Like, there were a lot of tears, especially in the beginning of the book, when you say some of the stories of October 7th, which maybe we'll come into in a second, and then slowly but surely how the Yad Hashem begins to reveal itself. And I began to understand that even the sad parts, Hashem hadn't forgotten about us, because in such a beautiful way, you wove into the narrative, it's all Hashem, it's all Hashgach, and it just becomes more and more intense, and Hashem slowly but surely peels away the layers, and you see how what could have happened didn't happen, and what happened, it was an incredible hashgacha. Just reading through the book, you finish and you're like, wow, I need to breathe. So fascinating. So let's try to do this chronologically. I know in the beginning, you share especially from Yisrael Katzover, some of the incredible heartbreak of October 7th. I mean, maybe just bring us into like a tiny little snippet of something that you write about pertaining to October 7th itself.
So, I mean, if I'm going into Yisrael Katzover, so they asked the journalist where they wanted to go, and he said he wanted to go to Shura. Shura was the place where they brought the bodies. And so he was there covering that, and he watched the Chevra Kadisha, and it was very, very hard for him to see it, because Yisrael Katzover, as he told me many times, for many, many years, he's been covering the briefings of the heads of the Shabak, the heads of the Mossad, the heads of the army, and everyone's like, we're the best, and we can do anything, and we're great. And suddenly he's like, Rabbi Sai, look what you did. Like, for him, as a person, as a military journalist, who for decades has been hearing from them, we can do anything, we're kol yachal, and suddenly, and he told me an amazing thing, which with Sinwar, he was there when Sinwar was released out of jail, when they did the whole thing for Gilad Shalit. He was there. I have a picture in the book. I have a lot of great pictures in this book. His son, Ariel Katzover, works in the Prime Minister's office. I got a lot of amazing pictures. So Sinwar was released. And he wouldn't sign. Israel said everyone has to sign a document stating they're not going to go back to terrorism. And they signed. Everyone it was a joke. But Sinwar wouldn't sign. He wouldn't sign. And that threw a wrench in the spokes. And they stopped giving him back that day to try to figure out what to do. And in the end, they let him go without signing. And because they said, what difference does it really make if he signs or not? Because anyways, if he wants to go back to terrorism, we'll go back to terrorism. And he became a hero on the Palestinian street as the man who stood up to Israel and didn't sign. And that guy became the hero. He was the mastermind of October 7th. And I'll tell you one thing to me that was unbelievable. They were sitting together. They have all the records of these meetings, him and his top guys. And he's with them, and he's like, we're gonna go through the fence, and they're like, how do we go through the fence? The fence is $1 billion fence. How are we gonna break through the fence? He's like, we're gonna break through the fence. It's not a big deal. I already built a mock-up of the fence, and I used a bulldozer to crash through it, and it's nothing. 5 minutes, and we're through. That's how this guy was. He would listen. HaKadosh Baruch he wasn't a stupid person. He was a smart person, and he used his brains for evil. And to me, that was like a crazy thing. So Katzer was like, he's like, he can't believe it, and he's in Shur, and he's watching the most heartbreaking thing, because he said one of the things was Hamas. They worked so hard to make sure that you couldn't identify the bodies. They worked in such a terrible way that no one ever did this before. No one ever went out of their way to try to make sure that no one should be able to identify bodies. And that's what happened. He said when he came to Shura, he was hearing clapping, he was hearing banging, and he didn't understand what it was. And eventually he figured out it was the sound of soldiers building coffins. Just hundreds and hundreds of coffins. Because it was a heartbreaking for him on many, many levels. But, he's seen a lot, and he's a stoic and a person who's able to, to go through everything, but it was a very, very hard thing for him.
Rabbi Nachman, the culture on the street in Israel around the period of October 7th was very splintered. There was great disparity between the different communities. As somebody who lived in Eretz Yisrael, someone who has his finger on the pulse, did that change post-October 7th? And the follow-up question is, today, a year and a half after it, 500-something days later, is the Achdus still there if it was? And what do you feel personally?
I feel that before October 7th, I think for the first time in my life, I really felt there was a chance of a civil war in Israel. And it was only the fact that Hamas attacked us that put Humpty Dumpty back together again. Nothing else could have put Humpty Dumpty back together then, if not only Hamas, only a war. Because brothers, Achim Beneshek, these guys, I met one of these guys. He was. I took my family on a boat ride in Herzliya, and the skipper was an older guy who told me he goes to these protests. Achim Beneshek. I told him, I want to tell you something, buddy. I'm not really afraid of anything in the country, really. But the one thing that scares me are you. You people scare me because you guys will burn down the country to try to save it. You scare me, and you know what? That is not. Well, it's not the way it was. Baruch Hashem, the fact everyone understands Most people, I say everyone, but the majority of people are not where they were before. It's a different situation. There's a lot more support for Bibi Netanyahu, but I think a lot of people understand that the only way we could survive in this neighborhood is if we're together. And a lot of fault came from the left media and from the people who are people on the radio, television, constantly bombarding people with the message of just making that rift greater. B'kitzur, it was a very bad situation. So what turns out that October 7th was a chesed covered in din, but it was a chesed because it pulled the country back together again.
Share with us, in the book you have a beautiful example of how beef jerky brought Yidden together. Talk to us a little bit about beef jerky.
So there's a person in the shir. I'm one of the founding members of at least the faculty's Daf Yomi shir, and there's a person in the shir. His name is Reb Chaim, and he came over to me. He said to me, I got to tell you a story. And it was interesting. As I was writing the book, people coming over to me, and each person, everything, Kosh Baruch was sending me things that need to go into the book, because this is like the Mesiras Nefesh of the beauty of Klal Yisrael. This is the flip side of Achim Neshek. You have hundreds of people coming and volunteering to prepare beef jerky, to put it into bags, and the kids are writing messages on the bags of chizuk to the soldiers, and then they deliver these bags of beef jerky up, and they have a badatz hechsher on the bag of beef jerky, because the soldier is only eating tuna fish, and he's in a tank up north, and he's sitting there cold and hungry, and he doesn't like tuna fish, and suddenly he gets a bag of beef jerky, which is geschmack, and it tastes good, and it's light, and it's not heavy to carry in your bag, and he opens up the bag, and he's eating beef jerky with a hechsher from the badatz, donated by people from Apei Shemesh and from other places. And there's a message from a kid on the bag that says, thank you for what you're doing. You're saving us. Keep up the good work. And so many of these people called up Reb Chaim afterwards and were like, thank you so much for what you did, because you really gave us chizuk. I was at a point where I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm away from my family for half a year. I can't do this anymore. And suddenly I open up this bag in my bottom of my bag, and I find this little bag of beef jerky, and I see the message from a kid, and I realize why I'm doing this. And so thousands and tens of thousands of bags of beef jerky given out to soldiers all over the country to give them the protein they need to do the job they need to do. And it's a beautiful thing. And I said, I really want to include that chapter in the book, because it's the flip side. It's the flip side of the evil. It's the good, the chesed, the beauty.
You spoke about Rachman B'din, like a strict justice cloaked in mercy. There's something that you come to a lot of times in the book, which I think we need.
A mercy cloaked in justice, right?
Mercy cloaked in justice. And you mentioned this multiple times, and that is that October 7th could have been a million times worse. And that is because it could have been a war on multiple fronts. Share with us the incredible threat that was on Israel's border that somehow just never came together, and by now was totally decimated. All
right, so the real plan was Iran is the mothership, and they give the orders. And the plan was that Hamas is going to attack, the Nukba force is going to attack, and at the same time the Radwan force is going to attack from Hezbollah and Lebanon. And they're going to all start shooting missiles, and they're going to break the walls from the north and from the south at the same time. While that happens, the Israeli Arabs are going to rise up from Jenin, Tulkarem, Shechem, Ramallah, rise up and start fighting the troops inside Israel. At the same time, the Houthim from Yemen are going to start shooting missiles. They're going to start shooting missiles from Iran and from Iraq, all at the same time. If that would have happened, even if just Hezbollah would have attacked Israel that day and they were ready to go, they had the motorcycles, they had the weapons, they were just as well armed as the Hamas was. If just those two things would have happened, and the army would have had to divide itself between those two fronts, they could have gotten all the way to Haifa. Who knows what would have happened? But Iran told Nasrallah not to do it. So you could say there's two ways to look at it. There's more ways than two ways, but look at it two ways. One way is Iran says, I don't want them to do it because I'm afraid. One way is Hashem says, no, I'm not letting them go in. Just like Hashem said to Hamas, you can go up to this point and no further. You could go to Tifrach, but you'll see the yeshiva, you'll see a fire in the yeshiva, and you're going to think it's a fire, but it's not a fire, you're not going to go in. You go to Ofakim, and on one road, you could go, and the other road you can't go, and the other road you can't go. So that's one way. You can go up to here and not one step further, even though there's no police on the roads. I don't let you go further. And so I don't let the Radwan force go in. That's one way. But there's another way, which is there's al pi derech hateva, there's not al pi derech hateva. There's one way Iran says, what happens if we let Hezbollah attack? What happens if everyone attacks at once? That's already a doomsday scenario. That's a scenario when Israel may have no choice but to send out the submarines with the nukes and to destroy Tehran and to destroy Iran. That's the other side. So Iran may have been thinking of that scenario when they didn't let Hezbollah attack on the day of October 7th. That could have been what they would think of. Maybe they were scared. It could be. We don't know their cheshbon. But one cheshbon is maybe it's a tziruf. Maybe it's on the one hand they're scared, on the other hand Hashem is putting, who knows what's really going on. But there's these different things happening. On the one hand, Iran is scared to go because they know if you put Israel against the wall completely, out come nuclear weapons. And by the way, there's an interesting thing that, this is just my take on it, but there was a Chaver Knesset who said, who said they were interviewing him, and they said, are nukes an option? And he's like, yeah, nukes are an option. And everyone yelled at him, what are you talking about? Can you say such a thing? And to me, what was I thinking when I heard that? I was thinking, and again, it could be completely wrong, but I said to Yisrael Katzer, could it be that Bibi Netanyahu sent him a message? This is what I want you to say. I want you to remind the world that we have nuclear weapons. And everyone's going to yell at you and say you're crazy. But they're going to remember we have nuclear weapons. And they're going to calm down. And it could be, and by the way, he said to me, it's very possible. I don't know for sure. I can't tell you for sure. But it happens a lot where somebody who's on a lower level will say something that a person on a higher level can't say. Now, I don't know for sure. I put that in the book. We'll see if the editors left it in. I don't know. But the point is, I think it's an important point. Because to me, I was like wondering, why did he say that? I think he was giving a message from someone else to the world. Calm down, everybody. Calm down.
Rabbi Nachman, when crazy things like this happen, even the most secular of Jews and people who are not Ma'aminim, and for sure those who are Ma'aminim, we're like, Yesh Elokim, people start wearing tzitzis and Shabbos, and the whole Israel starts singing a song about Hashem. And then time fades. And there's always the danger of the koichi vaitzam yadi, of the incredible, miraculous genius coming back. And there was incredible intelligence and the beepers and how they got Nasrallah and all these crazy things. How do we hold on to the chizuk that so many people got and understand that Hashem ish milchama, that v'anachnu b'shem Hashem Elokeinu nazkir, we continue and we constantly need to understand that Hashem runs the world, and particularly when it comes to periods and chapters of history like post-October 7th.
So there's two questions. You asked me two questions. How do we from the community, or how does the Jewish people in the world? What's the question?
I think the question really is both. How do we keep making sure that Hashem is not forgotten? And then even for us who we claim to be Ma'aminim and Baitchem Hashem, how do we hold on to this inspiration and not let it fade so that life doesn't just become business as usual? Okay,
so one of the reasons I wrote this book was that I want to lay it out chronologically for people to understand what really happened. Because it's a big jumble in people's minds and they don't really understand. It's hard to understand what really happened because you're like an ant on a wheel of a truck. You know something big is happening, but you don't quite sure know what. So that's what's happening right now. Let me lay it out for you. Let me lay out the whole sequence of events and show you what was going on so that you understand. So on the one hand, I write this book so that we should have it so that in 2 years and 3 years and 4 years from now, when it starts to fade, you have a book to remind you of what happened. But I think for every person, now I can't tell you 20 years because 20 years ago there was September 11th, and in America right now they said Bin Laden's a great guy. So I can't say what's going to happen in 20 years, but I could say any Israeli who was alive on October 7th will never look at the army the same way again. And it doesn't matter how many beepers and how many Nasrallas and how many, whatever. It doesn't matter Kalad Mashal, and it doesn't matter if they kill him, or it doesn't matter if they killed. It doesn't matter. Why? Because if the army that was so strong couldn't prevent a bunch of punks from Gaza coming across the border in pickup trucks, then all that strength doesn't mean anything. If Hashem lets, then you could stop 1,000 missiles in the sky and no one will get hurt. 1,000 ballistic missiles could come flying at a country and no one will get hurt. We don't understand. It's like we're living in Atari. You remember Atari? We're living in a game. Remember going to the arcades, PJ's game room in Woodburn? We're living in an arcade. 1,000 missiles coming at you and no one gets hurt. You're on a porch looking at it. That's when Hashem is on your side. And when Hashem's not on your side, a bunch of punks on motorcycles could kill 1,500 people. I don't think anyone thinks that it's the army at this point. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There's no question. It's only HaKadosh Baruch Hu.
And if you want to know more about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's involvement, you should probably buy the book. You should read it. It's compelling. It's emotional. And I was thinking to myself, after the previous book that he wrote about October 7th, what else could he put in this book? It's a whole new world. It's brand new vistas. Thank you so much for sharing this gift with Klal Yisrael. Let's buy the book, and we should read it once a year, twice a year going forward, so that the chizuk and seeing hashgacha continues to be a part of our life. Rabbi Nachman Seltzer, thank you so much for yet another gift to Klal Yisrael.
Thank you for having me. And I think in yeshivas they should start learning this as Musar Sefer. Musar Seder, you learn miracles, missiles, and Mesiras Nefesh.
We'll translate it into Hebrew, and then maybe they'll do it. Yashar Kayach, thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.